The story starts off with the ship docking on port. A character then comes off and smiles and yells that he and his party are finally here. We see people on the harbor trying to sell things while the character is happy to be there. His teammate named Walker puts his arm around him and says to Raymond if he is excited. Someone behind them tells Walker to be honest because he knows that he is just as excited. The big guy's name is Theron and he continues saying that he wants to tell everyone in the harbor how he feels as well. Theron looks up and says because this is where their adventure begins. The story takes place in a time in which adventurers from all over write their own histories through epic journeys. The era of the adventurer, these mysterious portals started, spawning all over the world are called gates. These are gateways to a realm that is home to terrifying monsters that did not exist in Maple World. Many died in these gates, however the rewards in the gates outweighed the risks by far. This drove those with ambition to challenge the new realm. We then see Walker saying that they need decoys. Raymond is confused in what he means. Walker elaborates saying that coming up with strategies prior to entering a gate is impossible, since they don't know what to expect. So many seasoned adventurers lose their lives in unforeseen circumstances. That is the reason many adventurers hire decoy slaves. A girl in the team speaks up saying that decoys are someone who can draw the attention of the beasts while they flee, and she doesn't see it as a bad idea to get some. We then see dirted up people in cells. The merchant tells the team that this place is owned by the Gaper Merchant Guild, and that everyone they see here is a decoy slave. He laughs and assures them that they will get their money's worth. He recommends to slaves that are relatively fresh, and Walker buys them both. The merchant wishes them luck as we see them now in front of a big red gate. Walker starts pulling out his sword saying that adventurers leave marks to show how many parties entered a particular gate this far, and there aren't any in this one. So that means they are the first one. Walker smiles and looks at his team and asks if they are ready. His team smiling back confirms they are. They are then transported inside the gate. Raymond falters and says that going through the gate felt weird. But when he opens his eyes he sees huge mushrooms. He says that he has never seen something so bizarre, and that the inside of the gate is different from what he imagined. Walker tells his team to keep walking. He continues by saying the portal usually opens far from any monsters, so they should be safe for now. He goes on saying that they can't go back the way they came in and their first priority is to locate the exit portal. The girl notices something, so she looks back and sees a monster in her face about to eat her. The team is confused and questions how a monster is here as the girl is eaten. They then notice that they are surrounded by a horde of monsters. Walker grips his staff and summons a fire arrow. He then shoots the monster that bite the girl. He notices something isn't right and tells his team to tie the decoys to a tree, so they can escape. As the decoys are getting tied up, one of them asks to be taken with them, which they decline. As Raymond ties the decoys, he is also apologizing. As the team runs, one of the decoys yells that they just can't leave them here. One of them gets mauled quickly, and it is presumed the other one suffered the same fate. The team is quickly running from the area. Walker tells his team to abort the mission and hunting monsters are out of the question, and they need to find a way to escape. Raymond is spacing out, not paying attention. Then Theron grabs him by the collar, telling him to snap out of it and listen to Walker. Theron tries reassuring Theron by saying that this time might be a failure, but they can still prepare and try again. He says they will survive together as a monster is about to crush him. The monster slams him to the ground, making the surrounding rock cave inward. Walker yells Theron's name, but he looks unresponsive as the monster towers over him. Raymond is on the ground, shook at seeing Theron in that state. Walker yells at the monster and prepares a fire arrow to shoot at it. The monster turns around and sticks its tongue at Walker, which grabs him by the neck. The monster then pulls him toward itself, getting ready to eat Walker as he yells for help. Raymond watches as the monster brutally eats his teammate. Raymond, who is still on the ground, turns around and yells for someone to help him as the monster approaches. The monster then opens his mouth and bites down on Raymond's leg, making him scream in pain. We then see someone in the tree watching the whole thing unfold. Raymond looks up and sees that it's the decoy. Raymond, relieved, holds up his hand and tells the decoy to save him. Raymond tells him that everyone else is dead and that it's just him. He also apologizes for what he did earlier. Raymond, still begging, tells him that he can't escape on his own and that they must work together. He grits his teeth and begs. The decoy is still standing there unmoved to what Raymond is saying. Raymond then yells at the decoy to stop standing there and save him while calling him a piece of trash. The decoy smiles and chuckles to himself as he jumps down. The decoy speaks and says that as much as he would loves to save him, he's afraid it's too late as we see Raymond half in the monster's mouth. Raymond laughs at himself and calls the decoy a stupid slave. He questions him if he can really survive by himself, and says he's obviously next as he gets fully consumed. The monster then puts its attention on the decoy. It pounces toward him, mouth open and ready to eat him. The decoy looks at the monster and says that he thinks he can survive as he swings back the spear and penetrates the monster, creating a hole in it. The monster falls, presumably not alive. He grabs his face and says because this isn't where he died, as he slicks back his hair. We can see some sort of catastrophe is happening. People are standing on a cliff when one of them says there it is, as we see flying monsters coming towards them. Then a huge dragon appears and is named Horntail, the king of the dragons. A woman then speaks up saying that the nest of Cantori has fallen as well, and now there is nothing left for them to rely on now. From the Cygnus Knights, the resistance to the Silent Crusade and adventures, not to mention the 6 heroes, in whom people put their trust. We see the woman's face as she says they all died. She continues saying that he is the only one left, the last adventurer, as we see she was talking to the decoy named Elpam. Everyone is getting ready to fight as we see above them the King of Dragons is getting ready to fight them. A small fast forward shows that the forest is now burning, and Elpam is blooded and bleeding. We see around him that bodies are around him. And in front of him is the head of a dragon. He looks up and thinks if this is really it, as we see the dragon is alive and only has one head chopped off. He thinks to himself that they suffered a massive blow but only severed of one head, and to only see it regenerate again. All they did was in vain. The dragon comes down roaring at Elpam. Elpam looks up and closes his eyes, thinking it's all over the world and their journey. He slams his fist on the ground and curses. He thinks screw that. With an angry face he thinks that it can't end like this. He thinks of his teammates Philip, Jaden, and Elysis. They all gave their lives. He lets out an animal-like scream. As he rises from the ground he thinks to himself that it can't end like this. He looks up and looks at Horntail, thinking to himself that he can't go down like this. He yells and conjures an energy beam at the palm of his hand. He starts charging an attack for the dragon. He yells to the dragon that he will kill it if it's the last thing he does. Something goes wrong with the spell. He then starts spitting out blood as the magic attack breaks apart. Horntail the dragon then starts to charge up a powerful magical beam. He then blasts it straight at Elpam. The beam comes down, killing him. He thinks to himself that why did it have to end like this, and if only if he had greater power, and that only if he could start over again. He then opens his eyes as someone splashes him and yells at him to get up. He looks confused, but the person speaks saying that he knows that he is not sick. We then see the merchant telling the slave to know his place. He stares and thinks to himself if he is even alive. He then notices his surroundings and finds out this place is a slave market. He thinks to himself that it doesn't make sense. He thinks that slave markets were abolished a long time ago, but he doesn't doubt that this is one. He notices that if he remembered correctly, this is the same merchant who sold him 6 years ago, when he was a decoy. The merchant is getting mad, but Elpam doesn't notice as he thinks that he really must have gone back in time. The merchant then swings at him and questions what he is looking at. Elpam sits by himself thinking if he is dreaming, but he tosses that thought away because it feels too real. We then see the team come to buy a slave, and Walker buying the same ones. Elpam thinks to himself that he doesn't need to think twice, and that this is a second chance. Back to the present, Elpam picks something up. He notices that it's a fire arrow and thinks that it's not a bad skill. He puts it on his back and thinks that it's actually perfect for him right now. As he walks he thinks that it still won't be enough, and that the party must have brought other things. He notices a shoe and remembers adventurers hide valuables in their shoes as he tosses it because he found a ring inside it. He puts it on and notices that it is the ring of telekinesis. He hears something behind him and notices a horde of monsters coming in his direction. He muttered that they must have come because of the scent of blood. They then come at him in all directions. He uses his sword to put holes in one. Then another fires its tongue. Wood grabs the sword and crushes it. Elpam is surprised, while behind him a monster is getting ready to bite him. Then he uses the staff to fire a fire arrow at the monster. He then thinks to himself that he should test the ring as well. He uses the telekinesis ring on the fire arrow, which makes the arrow go through multiple of the monsters. Then the arrow dies out. He thinks to himself that he can't sustain it for long as we see all the monsters burning. Then some monsters are left. He prepares to fight again, but is surprised when he can't use another arrow as the monsters attack. He thinks to himself that the staff isn't broken but questions if it might have a cooldown. The monster is coming from his side, so he lands and smacks it with the staff, thinking to himself that he has no choice. He continues to smack the monster, then he kicks it away, which sends it flying back. He checks if the staff is ready, which it is. As the monsters are closing in on him, he thinks that it's perfect. He shoots the arrow and then uses the telekinesis ring to kill the remaining monsters. He stands in the middle of all the burning bodies of the monsters. Then the woman behind him starts speaking and saying that he isn't an ordinary decoy. He looks down and is surprised she's alive. She goes on by saying that combat skill and magic, and questions who he is. Elpam thinks to himself that she is lucky but takes it back. She looks at his hand and asks him why he is in possession of the staff, and then freaks out why a slave has a magic circle. She stops and accuses him of being behind this anomaly. He looks at her without any emotion on his face, and asks if she is done. He speaks saying that she is mistaken and continues saying that it doesn't matter if they were alive because he would have killed them anyways. She starts to speak but gets cut off when he menacingly says she used human decoys to ensure her own survival, which leaves her terrified. He summons a fire arrow and tells her that he hates that. People started to question if that is even real. Elpam walks as people are surprised a decoy slave returned alive alone. Elpam thinks to himself that the die has already been cast, and that he must act quickly in order to avoid the same fate. He walks up to a building and thinks first he need to get rid of the slave status. Thank you for watching until the very end. Please like and subscribe and hit the bell. If you want a part to comment down below.